Life after death, where do we go after we die, and what happens in the afterlife? 5. Movement of subtle bodies between subtle planes of existence in the universe after death. In the afterlife, one is assigned that plane of existence which matches one's basic nature in terms of sattva, raja and tama after death. This is also a function of one's spiritual level. Hence, subtle bodies from lower positive subtle regions in the afterlife cannot go to higher positive subtle regions, and those from first or second negative planes of existence cannot go to the deeper planes of hell. This is similar to how people living in the plains find breathing difficult at higher altitudes, but people staying at higher altitudes manage fine. 6. What decides where we go after death? At the time of death, as the physical body becomes inactive, the vital energy used for the functioning of the physical body is liberated into the universe. This vital energy at the time of death propels the subtle body away from the Earth region. Just as the weight of a projectile decides how far a rocket will propel it, similarly the weight of the subtle body decides which plane of existence it goes to in its life after death. The weight of the subtle body is primarily a function of the amount of the subtle basic tama component in our being. The three subtle basic components, each one of us is made up of three subtle basic components or gunas. These components are spiritual in nature and cannot be seen, but they define our personalities. They are sattva, purity and knowledge; raja, action and passion; tama, ignorance and inertia. In an average person in the current era, the basic subtle tama component is as high as 50%. Please read the article on the three subtle basic components. The more we are filled with the raja and tama components, the more we display the following characteristics, which add to our weight and impact which subtle region we go to in our life after death: more attachment to worldly things and selfishness, more unfulfilled desires, feelings of revenge, higher amount of demerits or wrongdoings, higher amount of personality defects such as anger, greed, fear, etc. A higher amount of ego. By ego we mean how much a person identifies himself with his body, mind and intellect as opposed to the soul within, resulting in lower spiritual level. A permanent reduction in the proportion of the subtle basic tama component and the related characteristics mentioned above come about only with sustained spiritual practice according to the 6 basic laws of spiritual practice, and will help us in our life after death. Psychological improvements with self-help books or trying to be nice are at best superficial and temporary. 6.1 Importance of the mental state at the time of death. The mental state at the point of death, apart from what has been mentioned above, is very important. Our mental state is generally relative to the proportion of the subtle basic components in our being. If a person is actually doing his spiritual practice such as chanting the name of God at the time of death, then the influence of desires, attachments, ghosts, etc. are minimal possible for that person compared to his state when not chanting. This makes his subtle body lighter. Hence, if he passes away while chanting, he attains a better plane of existence in life after death among the sub-planes than what he would have attained were he to pass away without chanting. At the time of death, if a person is chanting the name of God and is also in a state of surrender to God's will, then he attains an even better plane of existence in his life after death, and his sojourn is undertaken with lightning speed. This is because the person being in a state of surrender on Earth region itself, has very less chance of increasing his ego in his life after death. Also, the entire responsibility of his well-being in the afterlife is undertaken by his evolved spiritual guide, Guru. 6.2 Who goes to hell after death? The following are the types of deeds in our life on earth that typically land us in one of the regions of hell in life after death. The extent, duration and intention behind the wrongdoings are important factors deciding the level of hell attained after death rather than just the action itself. 7. Life after death. In case of suicide, there are two types of death with regards to its timing. Destined final death, this is the time of death that no one can escape. Possible death, this is where a person can possibly die. Each person may undergo a possible death wherein one comes close to death but may be saved due to his or her merits. For more information on the types of death, please refer to our article Time of Death. In cases where a person is going through an insurmountable crisis in his life or has severe personality disorders, he may think of taking his own life in a depressed state. Ghosts, demons, devils, negative energies, etc. also fuel the depression of a suicidal person and sometimes are instrumental in pushing a person over the edge into committing suicide. However, in most cases, suicide remains a willful act that happens when a person is going through a possible death phase as per their destiny. Life on the earth plane of existence is precious and is given to us primarily for spiritual growth. When we kill others, we create, settle a karmic give and take account with them. However, by committing suicide, we squander away the opportunity for spiritual growth and hence incur demerits or sin. The gravity of sin can vary depending on the circumstances under which a person commits suicide. Invariably, the subtle body of an average suicide case will go to Bhuvalok after death. However, for greater sins incurred during their life and the circumstances under which they commit suicide, they can go to the lower regions of hell after death. Killing a saint incurs the maximum amount of sin, and on a scale of 0 to 100, it is 100. Killing an ordinary person incurs 40. On the same scale, killing oneself incurs 30% sin as opposed to killing another person of average spiritual level. Generally, people who commit suicide are at a lower spiritual level. Their spiritual level gets eroded due to continuous depression. 8. After death and before next birth, why is there a time lag between two reincarnations? In the course of research by using hypnotic trance to trace the past lives of the person, it has been found that the time lag between two reincarnations on Earth could be on average 50 to 400 years. The reasons for this time lag are as follows. After death, the subtle body remains in the heaven or the nether region for variable periods of time to undergo its merits and demerits, sins. Circumstances on earth need to